The other night I was at a meeting, and somewhere in the middle of the meeting, the lady across the table said to me, "Is the bishop's recent illness the reason they dragged you out of retirement and made you come back to work?" I looked at her somewhat surprised and said, "What do you mean retired? I've never been retired." She seemed quite surprised. It wasn't the first time I've heard this. In fact, it's become kind of a regular greeting these days in town and around the synod and the wider church. "We thought you were retired." Perhaps it's the white hair. I just remind people I'm going back to my natural color. After all, I was born a towhead. They don't seem to buy it. They seem to insist that I must be coming to the end, if not having already reached those years where productivity is done. I need to be put out to pasture. The work is finished. Time to move aside and let the younger generation take its place. Well, retirement hasn't happened yet. It's not even imminent. It's creeping up, but it's not there yet. And that's important for me because it means there's still hope for me. Because my mother's final words to me before she died were these: "Harold, you've never lived up to your potential. You know that, don't you?" You know, that could have been a devastating message, except for the fact that I'd heard it every day, every year of my life. You've never lived up to your potential. It didn't matter what stage I was in. I wasn't living up to my potential. And she had a host of reasons how I managed to screw it up. But she never did explain what it meant for potential. What was she looking for? What heroics, what greatness had I failed to achieve? How did I not measure up to her expectations? I never got an answer. Only the pronouncement. It was also a pronouncement that was given to me at graduation from the small liberal arts college that I attended. We were hounded each and every day in each and every class with the idea that simply because we had attended that institution and graduated therewith, we were destined for greatness. We were going to change the world. We were going to make a difference. We were going to make our mark. And over the years, I watched countless classmates receive accolades in their communities, in their work, in their vocations. Some of them were local, but many of them were national and international awards and accomplishments. And I found myself wondering, how did I screw it up so badly? How did I squander that education that was supposed to make me so great? It can lead to some dark spaces, as you well know, because our society gives us that same message, much more subtly than my mother, but it's there. We are measured by what we do. And most days, it doesn't feel like we're doing very much, at least not in heroic or great terms. One of the great learnings of this last year, at least for me, was that perhaps the most heroic thing that we can do in the midst of chaos and crisis is simply show up. I mean, think about it. Where would we be if those lab technicians hadn't just shown up every day to do their work, to run their experiments, to log data, to laboriously calculate? Would the scientists have ever had the data and the information to create a vaccine? We'll never know because they did show up. But what about those first responders that just showed up and did their jobs, that put their life on the line every time they entered a new situation, not knowing if it was life-threatening or not, whether it be a disease or a bullet that awaited them? But they showed up. Thanks be to God. With the countless doctors and nurses and hospital staff of all kinds. What would have happened if they didn't just show up and do their work? If you ask most of them, it was not different. It was just more intense. It was the same things that they normally did, day in and day out, just showing up. What about the counselors that kept our minds sane in a rather insane world, that served families in crisis, that dealt with domestic violence, child abuse, our own crashings and paranoia and anxiety? Where would we have been if they had not shown up and done their daily work? Or what about the office managers that kept businesses and institutions together, who suddenly became internet specialists, learning mass communication, running Zoom meetings, and all kinds of new and crazy innovations? Where would we have been if they had not shown up? Or how about all those who worked in the stores, who stocked the shelves, who waited on us, who bagged our groceries and brought them to the curb so that we would not be exposed, so we would not be put at risk, even though they themselves were at great risk each and every day, simply because they showed up? Or the truckers that got into their cabs every morning to haul our food and our stuff that we might keep going? Where would we be if the farmers hadn't continued to show up and to plant their crops and to harvest them and send them to market? Where would we have been without the sanitation and cleansing people? Would this disease have gone even more rabid? They just showed up and did their jobs, day in and day out. And we are alive today because they dared to do so. Martin Luther talked a lot about vocation. It was very important to his understanding and his theology. Vocations are not to be ranked as some more important than others, for God uses each and every vocation to further his kingdom on earth. In, with, and through what we do when we show up and do our jobs, God is working miracles. On most days, we don't have a clue. If we're lucky, some days somebody will say thank you, or we really appreciate that, or we couldn't gotten along without you, or you really made a difference in our lives. But most days, they simply just keep on doing their thing and ignore us, who just show up. It can be devastating if we let it wear on us. But God continues to bless us and are showing up. You have no idea what kind of an impact God is making through you. But you are a blessing. A blessing unlike any other, for there is only you that can be you. And it is you that are called this day just to show up again and do your thing. And God will perform the miracle. Awake, my soul, and with the sun thy daily stage of duty run. Shake off dull sloth and joyful rise to pay thy morning sacrifice. Direct control suggests this day all thy design or do or say, that all my powers with all their might in thy sole glory may unite.